I am also going to turn on closed caption so we can be accessible. And of course, I'm struggling to find the accessibility. Thank you. Thank you, Michaela. So welcome to Drupal for Gov's November webinar. Our topic for this month will be creating accessible web content. And our speaker for this month is Michaela Blackham from A10. So before we begin, I kind of want to talk about Drupal for Gov. Most of you all may know, but we are a community of open source lovers, which includes Drupal. So we offer the Drupal GovCon, which we've kind of put on our pause. We are looking for a location to hold our conference. We also do the Drupal training days, the half-day trainings. Hopefully we'll do that soon in the future. We are looking for space. And we also plan the government summit at DrupalCon North America, and we run these monthly webinars every third Thursday at 3. So if you're interested in presenting or have any questions or concerns, you can always reach out to us on Slack or Twitter, or at our email at drupalforgov@gmail.com. And if you miss a webinar session, we always upload. Once the webinar is over, we upload all of the videos to YouTube, so please check us out there. And I also do my best to add our webinars to the Drupal for Gov website on the webinars page. Just a little heads up, our webinar for December will be, it's time we prioritize web sustainability. So building low carbon websites by Mike Gifford. That will be our speaker for December. And we are currently planning our January webinar presentation. It will probably be more human-centered. So more information will be shared during our December webinar. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker. Her name is Michaela Blackham. She works as a web developer and designer at A10. She has a passion for physical and digital ADA compliance, and she also writes and speaks about accessibility. And you can find her articles and more information about her at a10designgroup.com /Michaela Blackham. Thank you for being here, Michaela. Now, I'm going to stop sharing so that you can.
Awesome, thank you. Let me just get the screen all set up. And to confirm, you can see, I'm assuming you can see the creating accessible content?
Yes.
Okay, great. I do have kind of a lot to go over today, so I do apologize if I speak a little fast. I'm going to try to go as slow as possible while also still getting you through all the information that we're looking for. Let me just get a couple things out of the way. And all right, I'm going to begin, and I hope everyone is ready for this wild ride. You're going to learn a lot today, hopefully. But again, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Creating Accessible Content for Your Website. My name is Michaela Blackham, and I'm the Accessibility and QA Specialist at Atten Design Group. I've been with Atten for just about 6 years. In 2 weeks, I'll have my 6-year anniversary. And over Atten's 22 years in service, we've been providing strategy, design, and development to mission-driven organizations. Notably, we have been working with Drupal for over a decade, and we contribute to the project in every way we can as an agency. Since 2000, we have been working with some of the most amazing mission-driven organizations in the world. We were founded to do work that matters. It's how we attract the clients we want to work with. It's how we attract the team that we need. And it's one of the reasons I joined the team 6 years ago as a front-end developer. And I had mentioned I started as a front-end developer. I have a background in design as well, but as of 2020, I moved into a full accessibility specialist role here at Atten to really make a difference in our process, build a partnership with the Blind Institute of Technology, and educate others on the importance of creating accessible products and services. Like I said, don't cut me short. I have years of experience as a front-end developer as well as an interactive designer, all of which had a focus on web accessibility. So let's jump to it. I always get this asked this question at the very beginning, and it's really, how did I get involved with such a specific area of focus so early on? And that's because I grew up with a cousin my age with Duchenne muscular dystrophy and watched how she was able to do her homework, navigate the internet, or even just listen to music on her iPod, all with little to no mobility and difficulty speaking loud enough for talk-to-type programs like Dragon or Siri. Sometimes she had to get very creative, but most of the time she had to ask for help, which I know frustrated her immensely. And I always wanted to relieve her of that stress. So I got involved with both physical and digital accessibility. But focusing on the accessibility of your site is important in order to relieve the stress of everyone using your site, not just for those who may struggle with it a bit more, like Em. Now, I have a lot to go over today. I had mentioned that before, so I do apologize if I am talking a little fast, but just know that you will be getting these slides in a recap, as well as a handout that goes over everything as well. And if you have any questions, feel free to either put them in the chat as we go or wait until the very end. However, just because of timing, I'll hold off on answering any questions until the very end. So let's talk about making your content accessible. Many people, when they think about making your website accessible, think that it's all up to the developer. And yes, developers, designers, architects, and all the roles have a major role in creating accessible websites. But a majority of the errors I see on most sites are actually related to just the content. And your content is one of the more important aspects of your site that need to be accessible because, well, people are coming to your site for your content, not because you have a cool drop down, but because of your content. So we need to make sure that this is available and easy to read to those who rely on assistive technology, who are blind or visually impaired, who are colorblind, suffer from cognitive issues, mobility issues, or auditory impairments. So let's take a look at the 6 important areas to focus on when creating accessible content. First, we always want to make sure that our visuals are accessible. So we'll go over some of the details with that regarding images and complex images. We want to know when and how to use a table properly. We want to make sure that we're producing scannable content for visual users, but also we want to make sure that that content is using semantic markup so that it's scannable for those who rely on assistive technology. We never want to override the site CSS, even if you know a little bit of CSS or HTML. And finally, we want to make sure that you check your work. It's very important. So let's just dive right in and let's talk about creating accessible visuals. So when I'm talking about images here, we're going to talk about including accurate alternative text for non-text content. So this is just anything that provides information for a screen reader, for instance, in place of images, allowing the content of the function of the image to be accessible to those who cannot see, or maybe those who have some cognitive disabilities. It's also displayed in place of the images in browsers if the image file did not load, or maybe your email, you have images turned off so that you have a faster load time. It also provides a semantic meaning and description to images which can be read by search engines or be used later to determine the content of the image from the page text alone. So again, it not only helps if it's accurate for screen reader users, but also for SEO. But as you can see here, I emphasize the word accurate. And that's because you have to have accurate alternative text. Just because you have the alternative text filled in doesn't mean that it's accurate. Doesn't mean someone can understand what it is. If they can't understand it, it's not accessible. We also want to make sure that we're including descriptions for our images. I highly recommend this. Not only does this help emphasize any point you have on the page or the reason to have the image there, but it really just gives a lot more context to what's going on. And it's great for not only assistive tech users, but also visual users. And just a little reminder that if you are including a description for your image, then your alternative text in the description should not say the same thing. Take advantage of the description to really talk about what's going on the image within the context of the page and to really elaborate on everything that it's there for. Now we're going to talk a little bit about accurate alternative text. This is very important. So ideally, we want to make sure that all text conveys information that is equivalent to the meaning or purpose of the image within the context of the page, meaning that the alt text could, for one image, could be different depending on why it's being used. We also want to make sure that it's staying as succinct as possible. I recommend about 10 words or less. If you do 12 words, it's not going to necessarily mean that it's inaccessible, but if you're keeping it succinct, then you're going to make it more accurate and less verbose for screen readers who are listening to it. We want to avoid using words like image of or graphic of, mostly because a screen reader user actually will hear what the element is before it reads the context of it. So for instance, an image, they'll hear image and then be read the alternative text, or they'll hear graphic and then alternative text. So it's a little annoying if they hear graphic of, and then the alternative text is there. It should never be the same as the file name. So obviously, most people probably have their file names as image01.jpg. That gives no information to the user about what's going on in the image. So never use the file name as the alternative text. And remember that alt text does not mean that you just fill it with a bunch of words for SEO. We don't want keyword fills in there. And this is actually being flagged and can hurt you on searches now. Having accurate alternative text is actually weighed higher on your Google search results. So you want to make sure that that's what you're going for. And if you have an image and that image is just a bunch of text, the alternative text should just say exactly what is going, like what text is on the image. So if the image says @ design group, we probably want that to just say @ design group. And this is one that I feel like I shouldn't have to say, but I actually do. And that's don't use emojis in your alternative text. There's really no need for them. And they're actually a lot more verbose than you may think that they are. So they're a little annoying to hear for screen reader users. And I'm not going to go into detail about social media posts today, because I do have a whole webinar on this. It's probably outdated because social media, as you guys know, they all update like almost monthly. So things change, but they all have options to include alternative text and descriptions for your images. That's Instagram, that's Pinterest, that's Facebook, Twitter, anything. So let's look at an example here. We have this picture from our summit from a couple years ago. This is the @ team during a presentation from the Blind Institute of Technologies. So let's take a look. What version of alternative text do you think we should be using here? Do you think it's a group of people listening to a presentation? Do you think it's BIT founder having a presentation or giving a presentation to @ design group? Do you think it's man standing in front of people in an office during a presentation? Or do you think it's Mike Hess, BIT founder, presenting to @ staff? I'd love to see what you guys are thinking if you just want to put a number in the chat and we can kind of see what everybody else is thinking what's going on. So we have 4, 4, 4. It looks like everyone thinks it's 4. So let's take a look and see what it is. And technically, they're all correct. So yes, 4 is a good one, of course. But as mentioned before, the alternative text should describe the content of the image based on the context of why it's being used. So basically, the alternative text just depends on why the image is on the page. What is the reason for it being there? Is it decorative? Does it serve a purpose? What is it emphasizing? For our case, this was being used to talk about the partnership with @ and BIT and listening to Mike speak internally at @ So the alternative text we used in this case was, oh my gosh, I don't know why it keeps doing that.
Mike Hess, BIT founder, presenting to & staff image. Mike Hess, BIT founder, you are currently on an image.
So as you can see here, this is actually voiceover on Safari, so you can hear kind of how that's actually working. And you can see that we went with Mike Hess, BIT founder, presenting to @ staff in this case. Oop. I don't know why this is, let's keep moving on. And remember, including a more descriptive version of the image is always encouraged if you feel the alternative text just doesn't convey the image's content. This is great for visual users, but also to enhance the context of the image for those screen reader users. So you can see down here, we elaborated a little bit more. There's a caption to the image, and that's great to associate with the image, but also it kind of can add more emphasis to why it's there on the page. So let's take a look at another one. What about images with text on it? If we're looking at this image, what do we need for alternative text? Do we go with Drupal 9, bolded Drupal 9 text, Drupal 9 with a shadow on a starry background, or graphic of Drupal 9 announcement? You feel free to put it in the chat so we can see what everyone is really thinking about. 1, 3, 3, 1. All right. Kind of what I expected. Everyone's really going for 1 and 3, and that's pretty accurate, actually. So obviously, I think in this instance, I would probably go with just Drupal 9 because that's the text that's being shown there. But as we know, technically, none of them are wrong. There's better answers than other answers. I think my next option would probably be the Drupal 9 with a shadow on a starry background. And I think that one could be, it's maybe a little too descriptive for probably why this is being used. But let's say this is a post about Photoshop and how to create something, then this may be a little more detailed and more of what they're looking for so that they know that it's on a starry background because you just showed them how to put text on a background or something of that sort. So like I said, there's never a wrong answer. However, there's always the best answer. And in this case, I think Drupal 9 is the best answer. So what about working with logos? What would the alternative text for this look like? We have @n design group logo, or @n logo. Any thoughts? We got some quick ones, 3s and 4s. All right. Technically, again, this is another one. They're all correct, really. I prefer exactly what this is saying, though. So this says @n. So I would probably do @n. However, @n is the shorthand for @n design group. So @n design group is also a great option. But then it's also the logo, which might be great just for someone to understand what's happening. So really, it's up to you and your organization for kind of what your pattern's going to be, especially when it comes to logos like this. But it's totally fine. I mean, obviously, I think @n or @n design group are probably my favorite options there. So let's talk a little bit about complex images. When I'm saying complex images, they're usually infographics, maps, and charts. It's usually just something that requires more than 10 words to describe accurately in alternative text. So what do we do if it's more than 10 words? Well, then the alternative text should actually just describe the point of the complex image. Let's say it's a graph and then we're trying to see like the population of the US and there's a bunch of things going on. The alternative text might just say population of the US is insert number there. I don't actually know what that is. Otherwise, we can just point to a description. Maybe the description is following the image. Maybe it's within the context of the page. You can actually just say exactly what's going on there. And if it's a complex image, this is one that you should always have a description with it. And that description can be just, like I mentioned, it can be right within the caption, or you can just point to something on the page that's describing the image a little bit more. So this could be in the page, this could be a link to a different page that really goes into detail, anything like that, as long as a user understands that there is more information to describe what's going on. So let's take a look at this map of @n highlighted here in downtown Denver. So this is actually our old location. Fun fact, we moved, we went fully remote. But what are some good ways to resolve this on the content? Looking at this, I think that I'm seeing @n in downtown Denver. So in order to talk about the alternative text, I would probably say something like Denver area map with @n design group highlighted, because that's really what we're focusing on. It's on like maybe like the where are we or the contact us. That would kind of be what it is. However, maybe it doesn't have enough information. So then we would want to do something like map described in description below. Maybe we're trying to do the directions to @n, and that's what it's going on here. And obviously that's not going to be done in the alternative text. So then adding that into the alternative text and then including the description after is a great way to kind of make that work. Or I see this a lot with like a lot of graphs, especially pie graphs in this instance. So if we're looking at this and we're thinking like, what do you think the alternative text would be for this image here? Feel free to write it in the chat if you want. There's a lot of words there probably. So if you don't, it's fine. I'm going to tell you the answer anyway. I'll give you a moment. Ooh, no one has any thoughts, but that's okay. So when we look at this graph, obviously it's about people's pets, and it looks like most people have dogs. So maybe a good example of alternative text for the graph is pie chart showing a majority of people have dogs for pets. That's a great one. However, maybe the context of the image is to show that rabbits are making a comeback as a pet. So then your alternative text would actually be something like pie chart showing rabbits and birds are growing in popularity or something like that. So you can see that depending on why the image is being used, the alternative text could be drastically different. And then we would obviously want to include more detailed descriptions and what's going on, included maybe like after this, or maybe pointing to something on the page as well. Now next we're going to talk about videos. And I know you're thinking that's not really an image, but it's still a visual. So we do want to talk about this a little bit. And there's a lot I can say about visuals, like the no blinking and flashing and keeping that under a certain threshold and making sure it's responsive, not having it on autoplay. But I think from a content editor's perspective, this is what would be the most relevant to you, or these items we're about to discuss now. So videos, for instance, they should be captioned. Caption is super, super important. YouTube and Vimeo have automated captions, which aren't horrible, but they aren't great either. This is a great way to start out, but it's always recommended to get these cleaned up. For instance, I'm using auto captions right now. So if you have that turned on, I'm not really sure how it works. Sometimes it's a little different depending on the version of Zoom you're on, but if you're seeing them right now, you may have gotten a couple laughs at maybe some of the words that it's saying instead of what it actually is. So it can be off. And it may be funny sometimes, but to a user who actually relies on captions, they want these to be accurate and clean. We also want to make sure that we're including downloadable transcripts. Transcripts are important for a number of reasons, especially including the deafblind community. But a big one that is relevant to you is that it actually boosts your SEO. It's great because now someone actually can make everything searchable. So let's say we're downloading the transcript of this. It's going to accompany the video on YouTube or wherever this is being held. And someone is searching like, oh, I went to this webinar and I'm looking for creating accessible visuals. And now that's in the transcript. And then that will now pop up in Google search. And then not only that, when you're on YouTube or Vimeo and you have the transcript open, you can search for the word that you're looking for there. It will give you the timestamp. You can click on that timestamp and it will automatically take you to that part of the video. So it makes actually interacting with the video way more easy. And we want to make sure we're including audio descriptions when necessary. Now, audio descriptions are a bit different than transcripts and captions. I know some people probably think that that's exactly what they are, but really just think about it for the blind community, that the audio descriptions is describing everything that's happening in the video that might be relevant. So something like, think about maybe a science experiment and that you're putting two chemicals together and then it's bubbling over in whatever, I can't think of what those glass thingies are called. Let's say it's bubbling over in that. That would be important for a blind user to actually understand what's happening, because the science experiment, you're putting those two together, so that audio description will describe exactly what they're seeing. However, sometimes an audio description isn't necessary if it's just a blank, like there's not much going on and you're only listening to something that's happening and you don't actually have any major visuals happening there. Like you don't need to have an audio description of my arms kind of going wild because I talk with my hands. That's not really necessary. And obviously adding a text description, similar to how we do that with other complex images, are always helpful. Not only is this helpful for a screen reader or someone who may be hearing impaired, but just for an everyday user to understand the reason or purpose of showing the video on the page. Imagine going to a page and you're trying to learn something, you see a video is like 15 minutes long. You're not going to watch it unless you know that that's actually going to answer your question or be extremely helpful for you. So in order to get that engagement up, you definitely want to include descriptions for people to understand what's happening. Next, we want to know when and how to use a table. Now, a table is always a fun one because I see them all the time. And I will mention this again, but I started developing back in the days when websites were built in tables, which is kind of wild to even think about nowadays because everything is so responsive. But we want to make sure that tables are for tabular data only. So you want to make sure it's just a connection between different types of data, key and value. That's all we're looking for here. We do not want to use it for structure, despite what my old college self was taught. We do not want to overcomplicate tables. If you're starting to have nested table and a nested table and a nested table, that's going to be a bit of a mess for any user to see on a desktop if it's a little too crazy, especially on mobile, because I haven't even gotten to that part, but there's no good way for this to display on mobile. So you want to make sure it's as clean and simple as possible. I did skip over these real quick, but the table headers, those are important. And you're saying like, oh, well, I include that all the time. I make it bold with a black background. That's not really what I'm looking for. Yes, visually that's saying it's a table header, but we want to make sure that semantically it is actually a table header so that screen reader users can actually interact with the table as necessary. And you guys are going to hate me for this, but I'm always going to say it. Always include a description that you can summarize exactly what's happening and give a little bit more information to kind of emphasize why that table is on the page. So here's a great example. I see this all the time where, okay, this is the same table top and bottom. The only difference is one is created with semantic HTML headers and one is not. So for you, they look exactly the same, but to a screen reader user, one is unusable and the other one is completely usable, and they can navigate and understand that Peter in column 1, row 2 goes with Smith, column 2, row 2, and be able to understand exactly what's going on there. So I know you're like, I don't understand how I'm supposed to be able to do this. I don't know HTML, but it's actually pretty easy to do in Drupal or other content management systems if they're using a WYSIWYG like this. So here you can see we just have the WYSIWYG open, and you can see that we're highlighting the table icon in the top there. So you would click on that table icon, and all that it will do is pop up this little bit here, and you can see we have rows, width, columns, height, and there's a headers section. So we want to click on the headers section, and you can see here we can do first row, first column, or both, because headers aren't always just on that top row. It can sometimes be in that first column. So in the example we had, first name and then last name, and you can kind of spread it out that way. But as we're on here, you can also see that there are inputs for caption and summary, and those have to do with the captions and the descriptions. So we want to make sure that we are including those with our tables. If you don't see the caption and summary, it's an easy thing you can turn on. You just have to reach out to your developer and they can make sure that that is on your site for going forward. Next, we want to make sure we're producing scannable content for all users, visual or not. We want to make sure that they're getting the content that they want. So let's take a look at how to do that. Descriptive headings and labels are extremely important. Headings and labels that describe the topic or purpose of the following content or the content that follows them ensures that labels and headings are meaningful when they are read out of context. So I don't know if you guys know this, I'll go into more detail about this after, but screen reader users can navigate by different elements on the page. So if they're navigating by only headings, they want to know exactly what content they're going to read. So making sure that that heading is actually very descriptive will help that a lot. This also helps users break up the content a little bit more and put them in slightly more manageable chunks for everyone to be able to read. So let's take a look at what I'm talking about here. So on the left here, we have paragraph text, and there's a lot of content, and you're trying to scan through everything that you see on the page. And let's say you just wanted to know about the partnership between livelovely.com and rentals.com. You're going to have to kind of go through. There's a lot to look at. It's going to take you a minute. You'll eventually find it, but it will take a while, or you may miss it. Who knows? By having descriptive headings like this, you can easily find the rentals.com and livelovely.com partnership. I always want to not say Live Lively is some reason what I want to end up saying every time. Livelovely.com partnership makes it very easy to scan. It makes it much easier just overall. Another important one is we do not want to write in all caps. I know you probably want to sometimes, maybe to make an emphasis, maybe to say that something's really important, but don't write in all caps. This is actually very difficult to read for anything more than a couple words at a time for an able user. You may not notice the difference right away, but it's because it's fairly negligible. Can't say the word right now. I'm so sorry. It's not something that you're going to notice, but it is something if it's a lot of text is written in all caps, it's going to kind of do an eye strain. It's going to be a mental wear there. It's also not helpful when someone may have dyslexia. It actually creates a bigger issue there. And when you're writing in all caps, screen readers announce this letter by letter. So if you're writing, don't write in all caps, it's going to announce DON''TWRITE. And at that point, that's not helpful at all. If you need a style added to the WYSIWYG that is in all caps for maybe like headings or something of that for short bursts of information, just ask your developer to add it to the WYSIWYG. It shouldn't be that difficult to do. And acronyms, of course, are an exception because you want that to be read letter by letter. Another big one, avoiding underlines, because underlines are the universal sign for links. If you see text on a page and it has an underline on, you're probably going to assume that you can click on it. So avoid underlines when possible. Use bold or italics for the emphasis instead. So for instance, we're looking at this bit of content. You can automatically say, if I said, hey, tell me what the link is on the page, I can guarantee you're probably going to say React and high charts, when in reality, we use the color to distinguish what's going on. So health system, data center, Drupal 8, React, high charts. Those are links. And to some users, you can definitely see that that's a link. However, to colorblind users, like a blue deficiency here, it's not as noticeable. Some people may not see it at all. I can see it, but it's still a little bit more difficult. So that's why you want to make sure that all of your main links within your text have the underline. Don't try to override that. We want to make sure that it's very easy to find because you want people to actually interact with those. Next, we want to make sure the link text is descriptive. This is very important because I had mentioned that screen reader users can navigate by links only on the page. So we want to make sure that those are descriptive. So we want to avoid vague links like learn more, click here. I see those all the time, and those are not helpful. You have to end up then looking around to the context of the page to understand, what am I learning more about? Okay, now I can find this heading. Now I can see what I'm learning more about and go from there. And then one thing I want you to remember is that multiple links that say the same thing on a page is considered vague. So I see this a lot with maybe like an event listing where join an event or join the event is listed. And that's actually fairly descriptive. But when there's 6 of them on the page, they're no longer descriptive because now there's 6 join event links and they're all going to different events. If it's on a detail page and you went to that detail page, you know what page you're on, join the event now makes sense because you know that that's the event that you're on. And you also want to be notifying the user that a link is external. So if you're going to a different website or you're opening up in a new tab, you want to make sure that that's being announced to a user visually and obviously via screen reader. And you also want to notify the user when a link is going to a different format than HTML. PDF is probably the most common one that I see, but PDFs, XML, Google Docs, and so on and so on. And we want to remember that logos and images that are links also need different text. Alternative text will not work as a descriptive link because the alternative text might be Michaela Blackham because it's my profile picture or something, but really it's going to a webinar about something that I had done, which is very confusing if the user thinks they're going to my profile, but they're actually going to the webinar. So you want to make sure that that text actually reflects where you're going. So here's a good example. What I see a lot is to learn more about the history of HTML, click here. If you're using a screen reader, all you're hearing is click here. Now you have to kind of go bubble up in all the text that you're listening to and try to find exactly what you're clicking here to go to. By changing it to learn more about the history of HTML, it's clear, it's concise, you know where you're going, and it helps with your SEO as well. So here's a good example, download annual report. This is great. We're downloading, we're going to a different page and here's what's going on. However, it's actually a PDF. So we want to make sure that we're including PDF in the link text. So a screen reader user who can't interact with PDFs, we want to avoid those when possible. They at least can know that they need to either find some help, open it up in a different format, reach out to you guys for an alternative format, or just not look at it at all and see if there's a different way to get that information. It's also great for us because there's nothing more annoying than when I go to a restaurant and I go to click on their menu now on my mobile phone because that's what they're all on. And I'm opening up a PDF and now it's all about zooming in and this and that. It's a very frustrating experience. And sometimes you just have to ask for like a paper menu at that point. And I mentioned it's not just PDFs, like an XML document's a great example. Or even a Google Sheet, Google Doc, anything like that. Anything that doesn't go to a web page needs to be included in here so that a user knows exactly what's happening. This is also great, as I mentioned, when you're going to a new website or a new page. You can see this is the icon that's usually associated with opening up to a new page. We have this stylized a little different, but in reality, what you're seeing on the back end is the alternative text for that image says external link. And if you don't have access to an image like that you can include, or it doesn't automatically happen via like the CSS that you're using, you can just add in external links so that any user knows that they're opening up in a new window. Let's take a look at this multiple vague link opportunity here. So you can see we're on the Nike website and you can see we have shop, shop, and shop. Those are 3. They would be descriptive buttons if there's only one shop on the page, but now because there's 3 and now you're shopping for must-have kicks, shopping for backpacks, and shopping for school uniforms, it's not very descriptive. So in that case, we would obviously either want the titles to be the link to where they're going, or we would want shop, like the button would just have the title included there. I will make a note that they are using ARIA label in this instance, so it is still descriptive to a screen reader user. However, that's kind of the workaround and not necessarily always the recommended approach. Now we want to make sure we're always using semantic markup, and this is because it goes hand in hand with producing scannable content. These two definitely go hand in hand. When creating semantic scannable content, not only does this make it scannable for you, who may be a visual user, but we may need to make this scannable for those who rely on assistive technology, screen readers to properly navigate the site. I mentioned obviously that they can navigate by links on the page. They can navigate by lists, by images, by articles, by nav instances, by anything you can think of, especially heading structure, making sure you have, they can navigate by heading 2s, heading 3s, heading 4s. So we will talk about why that's important as well. But I know you're probably thinking is like, how am I supposed to know if I'm doing semantic markup because I'm not doing any of the HTML? And I'm more so talking about WYSIWYG semantics. So this is something we can all make sure that we're doing. We want to make sure we're just using a list when it's supposed to be a list. If you have a list of items, if you are creating a Google Doc or a Microsoft doc and you're putting something into a list format, it's probably supposed to be a list on the HTML. If you're using a quote, you want to make sure it's in a block quote. If you're creating a table with tabular data, you want to make sure it's in a table. And a very important one is to never, ever, ever, if you're going to learn anything today, is to do not bold paragraphs to make them look like headings, because now they're no longer a heading and now a screen reader user can no longer navigate by it. And importantly, like kind of relating to the don't bold paragraphs, is you need to make sure we're using the correct heading structure. So let's take a look. As I mentioned, screen readers have the ability to navigate by elements on the page. So we'll kind of see how this is being used when we're, this couple slides now, I'll go into that in a moment. So you can see here, we're looking at the WYSIWYG, we have all the content on the page. And let's say we want to know how to create a list. These two buttons here, obviously we have an unordered list and an ordered list. If you want 1, 2, 3, 4, if there's an importance to the order, obviously use the ordered list. Otherwise you can use the unordered list. If you want to use a quote, this is what you would use. You would highlight the text and use the block quote. If you're creating a table, we already went into detail about that. You want to make sure that you're using the table. And this again is one of the most important, heading structure. You do not choose headings based on what they look like visually. You choose them based on the structure. You need to remember that heading 4s only come after heading 3s. You can't have a heading 2 and then jump to a heading 4 because you just like the look of the heading 4. That's not how that works. We need to make sure that the structure is there first. That way, screen reader users can navigate that they're, okay, I'm going to scan for this part of the site. Okay, now that I'm in the section I want, let me scan for everything that's below that. Okay, now I have that section. Let me scan for what's below that. If you're out of order, they don't have that easily scannable context that we might have as a visual user, being able to see all of those. And visually, they may look like a heading 4, but it's not. So this is a great example. This is what I was talking about before, how you can even see this. This is Google Docs. You can see I have the outline open on the left side. So you can see we have heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, heading 3. And on the left-hand side in the outline, you can see that the 3s are subheadings of 2. They're always underneath the 2. So that way they know, okay, I'm on the heading 2 section. Now I can kind of dive in to see more information that might be relevant to me. This next one here is like, okay, maybe someone like the look of the heading 4. They actually like the smaller look. I see this on like eyebrows or like labels for what type of event you may be having or something like that, where that be smaller than the actual title. So they do a different heading level, like a heading 4. But you can see here now heading 2 is supposed to be under heading 4s. But in the left-hand column, you can see that heading 4 is actually indented even more. So like that whole flow is not quite what we're looking for. And then more importantly, these heading 3s on the right are just paragraphs that are bolded to look like headings. And yes, they're beautiful, they're small, they're tiny, they're cute. But in the left-hand column, in the outline, you can see that they are not shown at all. And that would be similar to a screen reader user where now those heading 3s are not discoverable and they no longer have that ability to scan. Another important one is we never want to override the site's CSS. And well, you shouldn't override it for a few different reasons, but really like don't make the designers and the developers mad. In the design sense, design has completed all the, or they should have completed all the accessibility reviews for all their styles in the style guide, whether it's fonts, line heights, colors, layouts, anything like that. So if you're adding your new styles and options, you should be getting that vetted by your accessibility specialist or designer to confirm. And now you got that confirmed that it works, but okay, now you have to make sure that that is consistent throughout the entire site. So now you have to make those changes elsewhere. And it can be a lot of work for you. And ideally, it's just not something you should be doing. This could also break design patterns and consistency. They worked really hard to make sure that these are usable, extremely usable. The experience is great, that it is all accessible, and that you could be breaking those design patterns. Maybe it works really well on this one page you're on, but now you're overriding something else. Now the contrast doesn't work on a different element on the same page. When it comes to development, this is because developers create patterns that work for all screens and all layouts. So making sure that your thing is maybe your element's a little wider than you wanted it to be, so that you made the width bigger. Well, that could end up ruining all these pieces to responsive elements, so that maybe it doesn't work anymore on mobile or tablet or anything like that. So messing with those patterns and rules obviously can override important elements. And I mentioned it before, but if your site isn't responsive, your site is no longer accessible. And regarding the don't make designers and developers mad, I know you're probably going to ask, like, but I want to use this H2, but it's really too big, so I have to use the H3, otherwise it's going to kind of ruin what's going on. Well, don't do that. Contact your designer and developer to add another option into your styles. It's very easy to do from a developer standpoint. And what if I want to emphasize a new section? Like I mentioned before, like you have an introductory paragraph and you want it to be italicized and bold and like much larger. Well, contact your designer and developer to add another option into your styles. And I'm going to tell you again, insert any excuse that you may have here. And I'm going to say to contact your designer and developer to add another option into your styles. Mostly just because you can doesn't mean that you should. Just because you know a little bit of CSS or a little bit of HTML doesn't mean that putting it into the WYSIWYG is the best option. You want to make sure that whatever changes that you are making are going site-wide. And finally, we want to make sure that we're checking our work. Now, I'm focusing more on Drupal, obviously the Drupal for Gov, but I know that some people may be on WordPress or other CMSs, and there are some that are relevant here as well. But there are two major modules that I would personally recommend adding to your site if possible. Both have discussions about being added to Drupal core. I mean, that's been going on for a while. I don't actually know if that's going to be happening anytime soon, or maybe it has in the last couple months and I just didn't even know about it. But these are two different ones that I definitely think you should take a look at. First one is CK Editor Accessibility Checker. Now, I do have a couple links to these. You will get the slides later on. You will get more resources, so don't worry about writing these down. However, if you are interested, here they are. This is great because this is used anywhere that the CK Editor is being used. And I have to put an asterisk there. CK Editor 4, I think the newest one hasn't quite pushed it into there yet. However, that is something that is supposed to happen anytime soon. So as I mentioned before, this, like if you're using CK Editor, WordPress is, Drupal is, most CMSs are actually using CK Editor. You have the ability to use this. It adds a new button to the WYSIWYG where you would click on that once you created your content, and then it will actually go through all the content in the WYSIWYG and kind of correct what they're seeing. If they're seeing bolded text that looks like a heading, they're seeing a list that looks like a list but isn't actually one on the back end, and things like that. It will correct what you're looking for, and it's actually very accurate. The other one that we're going to talk about isn't quite as accurate, but it's still, this one is still one of my favorite ones. However, being hidden behind a button is a downfall because not everyone's going to click it. It has its pros and cons, of course, but I will show you the CK Editor tool in action.
So here's an example of the CK Editor Accessibility Checker. You can see here we just have some normal content on the page. We have a table, some headings, some links, some lists and images. So what we're going to do is we're first going to take this little button on the page here. We're going to click that. And then from there, it actually goes through and gives us all the answers that we may need. So you can see here, we have 1 of 7 errors. It gives us what the issue is, how to resolve it, and like actually being able to resolve it here. You can ignore, or you can actually fix it. You can then go through and kind of click these arrows to kind of see what's going on here, whether it's a warning, what the suggestion is, or maybe you go through here and it tells you you have to actually use a list, and so on. So you can keep going through until you resolve all the issues, and then that way you can publish without any worries.
The next one I want to talk about here is editorially. I always have a difficult time saying that. This one is a Drupal only module. So you can see here, there's only going to be one link. It automatically checks your content. That's why I like this one, because it's not hidden behind a button. It will automatically check whatever content you have. So once you publish, it brings you to a new page and we'll have all the checks going on. It will do similar ones to what's going on in the last one I showed you. It's also customizable. So I believe that if you have something like maybe you're writing acronyms all the time, I find myself always writing A11Y instead of accessibility. That's a great one for me that says like remove A11Y and put in accessibility instead. That would be like an easy check that you can add. The difference between the two is the CK editor only really checks the WYSIWYG that you're currently making content changes in, whereas editorially will do the entire page, which is great. However, if your designers and developers already created an accessible site, then you shouldn't have to worry about the entire page. You should only have to worry about that CK editor area or the WYSIWYG area. So let's take a look at editorially in action.
Now let's take a look at editorially in real life here. So you can see here we're using Ames Community College. They so gratefully let us take a look at it as we've been using this on their site. So you can see here, if we look quickly, you can see we're getting some highlights here. Little question mark there, question mark. Ooh, we got a red outline and little notification there. And as you can see in this bottom right-hand corner, we have this little thing that you can turn on and off. So this is actually the editorially. So I haven't even saved this. This is in preview mode. So you can see we still have back to content editing. So we're kind of looking at this before we even publish. And you have to go through this step before it actually publishes. So what you can do is you can end up showing the tags. So you can see kind of like where we're at on the page and see we went from a 1 to a 4 to a 3 to a 2. It kind of gives you that great idea, and then you can skip to some other content there. So let's get rid of that. Then you can see we can get some more information on what we're using this for, kind of skip to each one and minimize what we're working with. But let's see how this is working. So you can see I'm hovering over what's going on here, and it's telling me that my heading jumped from a level 1 to a 4. So really this should probably be a heading level 2, because this is probably a heading level 1. If we scroll down here, we can see another one, a possible heading, because that seems to be just a paragraph that's bolded. This is another one. I mean, this is the same content from before, so you should be able to see that this is the list item of what's going on, and oh man, that should actually be a real list and not just look like one. Then we can see that there's an issue within the table header as well. So you can kind of see that this is nice check before you even publish, and that's why it's nice, because it's not really hidden behind any kind of button. It's done right away.
And this is something, as I mentioned, like these are modules that should be added. If you are interested in them, definitely talk to your developers. And this is something that they should be able to add fairly easily. And then hopefully it will help your accessibility journey overall. Now, there are plenty of tools out there for automated testing. And one thing I do want to remind you is that not everything related to accessibility can be found with automated tools. A majority of issues can be found by manual reviews and human logic. However, these automated tools can definitely help you make the best decisions and create the most accessible content for your site. So one of the first ones I would recommend to someone that's not very technical is definitely wave.webaim.org. I recommend it because it's free. It's accurate and it's a well-respected tool, and it's very easy to use. And that's even for non-tech folks. I mean, you can easily kind of get on there. There's an extension there as well as just a website. So the extension is great, especially if you have to check something that's behind a login. However, the one thing that kind of stinks with this is that you do have to ignore the errors or warnings outside of the content area. However, that's, again, hopefully that the developers and designers created a website that is already accessible and that you can just focus on the content. If not, you can just make sure that you're just within the main section of the site. So here's an example. I have the Apple website. So you can see here, this was Wave was run. You can see we have an option to turn the styles on and off. So if you turn it off, you can actually see kind of like the structure of the site, see exactly what's going on from a screen reader perspective to make sure that maybe like headings are actually headings and not bolded paragraphs, for example. You can see we have a lot of information going on the left. I tend to usually turn off the features, the structures, and the ARIA, at least if I'm doing the content reviews. So I would definitely recommend that. And you can see here we got errors, contrast errors, and alerts. I would focus mostly on the errors because contrast errors hopefully are not related to what you're doing, and design has already figured that out. And the alerts are something you could take a look at. So like a link to a PDF document is definitely important, that maybe is flagging that so that you can at least make sure that it includes the parentheses PDF in that link. Let's see. And then we have like suspicious link text. That's usually if it's like learn more. Click here, things like that. So we want to avoid that. You can see in the left-hand column, you can click on the actual element itself, and then it will take you exactly where it is on the page. So you can see what element it's referencing. You can click on the little eye icon. It will tell you what that change why that change needs to happen and why that's an error. You also have a code option down on the bottom area where you can then, if you're a little more code savvy, you can actually click on the element and then it'll take you to where it is in the code. So you can see exactly where that needs to change. And then of course you can click on the icons in the right side on the actual website, and then it will bring up more the same kind of information that you would get on the left as well. The second one I always recommend is Google Lighthouse. This is for a slightly different reason, but I recommend Google Lighthouse because it's free. If you have the Chrome app, then you have Google Lighthouse on your browser. Something that's new is that your score is actually weighed on Google searches. And not only that, it doesn't just do accessibility, it does SEO, performance, accessibility, performance, best practices, and then there's one more, but I can't think of what it is at the moment. And then this is another one where you just need to ignore other errors and warnings outside of the main content, but it is very helpful, at least to get the score of your site to see like kind of how you're rating. So here's an example. I have the Apple website. We did Lighthouse, and you can see it's only an 89% out of 100, which is kind of funny to think about because it's Apple. You would think that it would be a little bit better. And so here we're rated 89. You can see we have some information here. So one that would be relevant to you, because obviously you don't need to worry about ARIA. You don't need to worry about background and foreground colors, but the heading elements are not in sequentially descending order. And that has to do with it's skipping heading levels. So maybe it went to a heading 1, to a heading 4, to a heading 3, to a heading 2, and so on and so on. So we'll flag those so that you can make sure that that's being weighed correctly. And then that obviously improves your score, which improves the SEO of your site, which improves everything. We also want to make sure that we're viewing all of your content on desktop, tablet, and mobile. And I'm saying this mostly because this is especially important with Layout Builder and layout paragraphs. Now that you have full control over the layouts, you want to check that your layout is properly working on all screens. You are creating content for desktop, but many people are actually looking at this on their phone. So you want to make sure that that's translating correctly. So you want to review on your desktop, you want to review on your tablet, you want to review on your phone. However, if you don't have access to a tablet, that's totally fine. Just make your browser bigger and smaller and kind of play with those things and just see how that flow of content actually works. And this is important for 3 main reasons, because you need to make sure that your site is responsive in general. If your content isn't responsive, I'm going to keep saying this because it is so important. If your content isn't responsive, then it does not pass any WCAG guidelines, and making sure everything looks as it should and doesn't look broken. Obviously, that's going to be important. We don't want anyone scrolling left or right if they don't have to. Your content flows in a logical order. We want to make sure that we're paying attention to that. Right now, we obviously read left to right, up and down. We want to make sure that that still makes sense. We don't want things kind of jumping around, and we want to make sure that that's following the correct order. And finally, be sure to just zoom in on your content. You should be able to zoom in to 200% of the normal size and still be able to read the content without necessarily scrolling left or right. That's a very important one for those who use screen magnifiers who are visually impaired. And just remember when creating content that you just keep it clear and concise. I know sometimes we want to include everything and go a little overboard. We want these headings to be super long and descriptive. We want this, we want that. But clear and concise and keeping it simple is always the way to go. And overall, just remember that with great power comes great responsibility. This is something that is always super relevant, but definitely emphasized more with all the amazing work with Layout Builder and layout paragraphs. This is great for giving content editors true control over the content, which you didn't always have before. So have fun with your layouts and your content, but make sure to keep things clear and concise, easily readable, follow great content editor rules, and don't forget to check your work. And if you follow all of those, then you should be creating accessible content in no time. But if you're still looking for more help, just remember that Atten is here to help. We believe in giving back to the community, like doing informative webinars like the one I'm doing today, as well as free consultations for your site. So if you're just curious about how an audit would go or how your site is performing, that's something that we can definitely help with. And then obviously, if you want to move forward with anything, we're here to help with anything that you may need. And as mentioned, I've done a lot of webinars and blog posts that should really help you on your accessibility journey. These are some of the ones that I definitely recommend that I've done, especially the introduction to Web Accessibility 101, the Q&A with Atten and BIT, I always think is interesting. That was one we did at DrupalCon where people got to just ask, like from the accessibility standpoint with me, ask from a screen reader standpoint with Mike, was to ask about how BIT was created and things like that. So it's definitely some good webinars to take a look at. And that's it. Just remember, if you have any questions that we didn't get to today, or would like any follow-ups or even more customized training for your team, feel free to reach out to work@atten.io. And that's it. I know I like flew through everything and I am so sorry about that, but I'm trying to get in as much as possible. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat. I did see a couple come in and I will answer those in a moment. And then obviously, if you have any other questions that we didn't get to today, feel free to email me, Michaela@atten.io, and hopefully I can answer any questions that you may have. And as mentioned, I will be sending out this slideshow for a recap. And I also have a handout for everyone. It is a PDF, and I know PDFs aren't accessible. So if you do need the original file, I can definitely send that as well. You just let me know. And yeah, I'm gonna not share my screen anymore, but I don't know why it's, there we go. Nope. Am I still sharing my screen? I might be.
Yeah, you are, but
there it is.
I can help you with the questions. I think you have one that says, what format should the downloadable transcript be? A PDF?
So the downloadable transcripts are usually, I can't remember the exact format. I think it's just a .txt. It's just plain text, if I remember correctly. I would avoid PDFs where possible. I do have a webinar on that as well about creating accessible PDFs. For reference, PDFs are pretty much not accessible. And if you are creating PDFs, they also have to follow WCAG guidelines, meaning like color contrast and heading structure. And they're not accessible, just as a quick reference, because screen reader users need to use Adobe Acrobat to read them. It's the only way that they can interact with them. And most PDFs aren't made in the correct way. So then you have to actually go in and tag them correctly for the correct elements. There's like a whole lot that actually goes into it. So when in doubt, that's an important one for you all to know. Try not to link to PDFs, but like I said, if you do, make sure that the user actually knows what's going on, and just make sure that if they can't access it, you may be contacted for the original format so that they can interact with it then.
Okay. And someone is asking for your slides. So I know if you provide them to me, Michaela, I can upload them to Drupal.
Awesome.
For Gov website.
Down with PDFs. Oh yeah. I know PDFs are not the best. I would say if you can do an EPUB instead of a PDF, that would be my recommendation. Or I would say my recommendation is to make an HTML page, like a regular page on your site, and then an EPUB, and then a PDF as a last case resort. However, I know there's probably a lot of PDFs archived on your site. And that's why I said, if you have them, you can't avoid them. It's fine. Just make sure you're warning all the users that it's going to a PDF.
Any more questions? Thank you so much, Michaela. This topic is so important, especially when it comes to government websites.
Absolutely. And sorry again that I tried to fly through that, but it looks like I got through all the slides. So I'm glad you guys all learned a little something.
Right. And thank you everybody who attended, and have a safe and happy holiday, Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next month. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.